Hello and welcome to Counterpressed on The Ringer and Spotify. I'm in the studio with Gilly, Flaherty and Jessy Humphreys. On today's show, Arsenal are out of the FA Cup at the quarter-final stage. Their loss to Brighton was the big upset of the weekend. Liverpool, Chelsea and City all through to the semi-finals. We'll talk about that, Jessy and Becky's trip to Barcelona, and of course reflect still on the Champions League quarter-finals. JPH, back from Barca.
Yeah, it was lovely.
Yeah, good way to cool your head.
Yeah. My head wasn't that hot, to be fair, I don't think.
No, compared to like previous Champions League exits or big Chelsea defeats, I think you were relatively calm.
Yeah, but nice to get out of the country anyway. Obviously love Barcelona. The game obviously wasn't like the world's most exciting game, but it was a really nice trip, lots of nice people on it, and then I spent Friday morning just sat by the pool.
Oh, sat by the pool.
Yeah.
Was it really warm there?
Yeah, it was boiling. Yeah, It was like 20 degrees.
Wow.
Boiling for British standards.
And boiling for like April, March time.
Yeah.
What
nice.
were the vibes
Becky
like?
went for a swim. I didn't. I was not that prepared.
What was the vibes like in the stadium? It looked great, atmosphere.
Yeah, really good atmosphere. Obviously the first time the women have played there since they redid it all. Alexia's 500th Barcelona appearance and she scored, so that was pretty cool. I love going to Camp Nou. It's always like an amazing atmosphere. So, yeah, it was nice to be back. I hadn't been there for the last time Chelsea played them there. What was that, 3 years ago? Maybe?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy, the eventual scoreline. And I feel like if Real Madrid were, in the grand scheme of things, a bigger, more well-supported women's football team, there would maybe be more of a reaction and introspection and crisis. But because we're so used to Barca beating them, maybe there's not. But the aggregate scoreline to be that big is pretty embarrassing.
Yeah, well, when you add that Barca also beat them then 3-0 on the weekend in between the games, so it was 15-2 across 3 games or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I kind of wrote my Observer piece a little bit around this in terms of, El Clasico is such a, exciting football match, like maybe the best, biggest rivalry in world football, effectively. There's so much of sort of Spanish politics and history tied up within that I think for it to be so one-sided is draining, I think, in terms of... I just kind of feel sorry for Barcelona to an extent, and I think in the game itself, in the stadium, it's very much like giving North London derby, when Arsenal are battering Tottenham. It's like, if you're a fan of Barcelona, you do not get bored of seeing you score goals against Real Madrid. Totally understand that. And I guess North London derby's been a bit like that over the years as well. But Arsenal then get like other rivalries domestically against teams where the games are closer. Chelsea, City to a lesser extent. Even United, I guess, in recent years there's been quite a lot of aggro between those teams. Whereas obviously in Spain, Real Madrid are the second best team. So it just feels like for Barcelona, you obviously lose a little bit of a sense of maybe how good they are or what they achieve. I kind of came away from that game, and obviously I've seen Barcelona play Chelsea this season, so it's not like you've got no ability to sort of judge exactly where they are. But you're just a bit like, I don't really know whether this team is any good or not, because Real Madrid just look so pathetic. And part of it's mental, but I think part of it is also like a club that just doesn't take much interest in the women's team, and that's a shame. And I think that's a shame for Spanish women's football in general. And I guess it's kind of interesting when you think about like the legacies of someone like Alexia or Aitana, and obviously what they've achieved on the European stage and on the international stage means that their view in the world as being some of the best footballers of all time, I think will be firm. But you just imagine like what it'd be like if that was also taking place in a really exciting, vibrant, quality domestic league.
Yeah, I came away from it feeling very sorry for the Real Madrid players, because when Barcelona score so early off the back of already a dominant first leg, you're like, oh God, it's going to be a long afternoon. And to have to play the full 90 minutes and get through it when goal after goal is going in. Jill, what would you have been like in that position?
It's hard because you think obviously the first leg was so, you knew it was done in the first leg. So to go there, they're at home, do you know what I mean, as well? It's one of those ones where you just got to you can't even say try and play for pride, because obviously the scoreline then again was big. So it's difficult, but it's just, you got to give obviously hats off credit to Barcelona. And it's also a bit like, as in a bit of a probably a not an eye opener, but in that sense of like Real Madrid, where do they want to be? If you want to be like Barcelona and actually challenge on all fronts, then that's the difference there. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's probably a thing of Real Madrid, of where, in regards to investment, or are you sort of happy playing second fiddle to Barcelona, or do you actually want to go on and push them further? So it's a bit, that's the difference, I think, in them two games, where you see the difference in the standard.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, let's get into what happened in the Women's FA Cup over the weekend next. So the biggest shock came at Meadow Park, Arsenal losing 2-0 to Brighton, goals from Madison Haley and Caitlin Hayes for Brighton. This feels almost like textbook Arsenal under Eidevall and Sleggers, which is you have the big high of that Chelsea Champions League victory, and you follow it up with this big low of losing in the quarterfinal of the Women's FA Cup. And it's been 10 years since they won this competition. A competition they've dominated. They've won it 14 times. So to crash out at this stage is massively disappointing. They've obviously had this huge achievement in the Champions League. And obviously for many teams, it's hard to manage the highs and lows. Arsenal aren't alone in being a squad that has to navigate that. And the mental and physical toll that is taken on your body when you've had one of those big highs is massive. Jill, I know you were covering the game for 5 Live. What did you make of what happened at Meadow Park?
Oh, it was just such a... I mean, Brighton, give credit to Brighton, because they defended really, really well. And it weren't a game where they just sat back and just let Arsenal come at them. They actually went at Arsenal. They put them on the back foot. Out of the two teams, they looked like the team that was most likely to score initially anyway. And it was just like, obviously there was a lot of changes for Arsenal, obviously, after the midweek game. But what I was saying even on the radio, like, it weren't a game where, like, we've all been there and we've all seen them, where, like, Arsenal, Chelsea and that, they're like peppering the goal. And you'd be one of the games where, like, we could be here till midnight and they just can't put it in the back of the net. That weren't even happening. They had a chance in the first half of Holmberg where Inadozie makes a big save. But it's just, it wasn't that where it was like Arsenal were creating. I mean, I don't think the pitch was poor, in my opinion. You're watching it, the ball was bobbling. And obviously both teams got to play on it. But I think when you're Arsenal and you're so used to playing at like the Emirates, that you can see the difference of the way they want to play. So I don't think that helped at all either. But it was just a really flat game. And credit to Brighton, they obviously got their chances and they took them beautifully.
Yeah, we do need to give Brighton a lot of credit. Fran Kirby player of the match, but she kind of ran the show. They were brave, and both Vidicic and Kirby talked after the game about how they knew as soon as they took part in the warm-up that they had to adapt their game. They couldn't take any risks. They had to keep it simple. And I do think there's that aspect of Arsenal maybe not being savvy with that. And obviously the fewer games they play at Meadow Park, the harder it is to come in and adapt. And it's funny because it used to be the other way around, where Meadow Park was this really strong home base, and then they were having to adapt when they play games at the Emirates. And now obviously it's the reverse. I think when you look at Sleggs' record, she's lost 1 out of 22 at the Emirates. She's lost 5 out of 15 at Meadow Park. Obviously, that when you look at the context of the games they've played there, they had some tough Champions League fixtures at Meadow Park. They've played some bad League Cup knockout games at Meadow Park as well. So that is all factored in. I also think there's that mental element that comes into it, and Max wrote about this on the cutback, which is like the highs and lows and managing that. When if you maybe you could speak about this, Jill, from a player point of view, but if you're a player and you know you're going to the Emirates in front of a big crowd and it feels like a big game, finding that motivation, tapping into that when you're a little bit tired maybe off the back of a big intense block of run of games is probably a little bit easier than coming to Meadow Park, smaller pitch, tougher conditions. I just find Arsenal are going to have to navigate that. Obviously, there's a point at which probably all of their games will be at the Emirates, but they'll still have to name Meadow Park as this backup because of the men's team being in every single competition. There's always going to need to be an option to play there. But it does feel like they're slightly becoming a side where, like, on the big occasion, they can tap into it, and on the maybe sloggier, tougher nights at Meadow Park, they are finding it more challenging. And the conditions is one thing, but can you speak maybe to what it's like as a player having to mentally adjust for those changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, obviously back when I was playing, it was obviously the big games at the main stadiums were few and far between, and it was the games that were there. You're talking even like Wembley, you're talking these are like cup finals, so it's like you have no issue in getting yourself up for that game. But it is difficult. Obviously, I think the way the Emirates pitch, how big it is, it suits Arsenal because, and I also think it's for teams coming up against them who it's hard for them to go and do that press because of the distances, compared to Brighton, who were like, listen, like, let's go at Arsenal. And I mean, the quality of the pitch as well, it was just bobbling everywhere. But I also think in regards to like players as well, so that obviously in regards to all the changes that was made, like, now these are players that were coming in who could go and start at other WSL clubs, but it was just where you make so many changes. Like, you're looking at how, in my opinion, Black Sinis has looked good in like the number 9, and then she had Marnan behind her, who isn't the same as like Russo playing there. And then you had Mead and Kelly on the wings, who sometimes I think with Kelly, she just focuses more on getting involved in that beef with the fullback rather than actually going. Whereas with Ford, I think, when she come on, she's not interested in the fullback. She's interested in getting it and then doing what her strengths are, which is getting into that space. And I just think then you had Smith on the opposite side, who then was sort of being like Kelly, as in getting involved in beef with the defender rather than actually doing what she does best and her strengths. And I just think that the changes that were made, Fox for me, I think, was the biggest one. And I was questioning of why she weren't brought on earlier, because I think, no discredit to Holmberg, but as soon as Fox come on, she was then being able to get past the defender and put the balls in the box and winning corners and that. Where I felt like Holmberg weren't really able to do that. I think in regards to like the stadium, I think these players here shouldn't be players that should only find it easier to get up for big games, games at this main stadium, because Meadow Park is still your bread and butter. But I just think collectively, when there's so many performances that just aren't, I mean, Caldente, that's probably the most I've seen her give the ball away in a game, which is natural because she's probably really, really tired. It's just when you have so many of these issues going on and so many players off their game as such, Brighton are probably thinking, touch, mate.
Yeah, it was mad as well seeing Van Domselaar, who had such a brilliant game midweek, literally just miss a really simple catch for that Hayes header. It just went through her hands. It was crazy. And she'd made a mistake in North London Derby, but also pulled off a good save in that game. But again, it's like we get these two different versions of Arsenal sometimes. And a lot of fans, I mean, Tim spoke about it on last week's show. A lot of fans obviously are excited about the potential of going back-to-back in the Champions League. But there is an expectation and a need to be competing for domestic competitions. And this is a competition in which they absolutely cleaned up. And also, as a fan, it means a lot to get to Wembley. And I do think there must be frustration about how they still can't get that consistency that is so important if you are going to be a team that can win it all.
Yeah, and I think we've sort of talked about this a bit in the past as well, that like a league title is also something that's been a long time since Arsenal achieved, and I think lots of fans would like that as well. And the inability to sort of find that consistency is something that really hinders you in the league. And I know Arsenal are in the best position aside from City in the league, so of the sort of best of the rest, they're kind of there, but they've not been in the title race all season, right, because of their slow start. And Arsenal haven't seriously been in a title race for 3 seasons, is it? So, and I think that comes from like this thing of, Slager said it after that Chelsea game, the WSL, like this team, like can rise to the occasion when they, just lost to United in the week or whatever. And that's clearly true. This team does get up for like big games and they get good results like consequently. But you also have to get up for like the tough games. And it is like, it's interesting because Chelsea took their time to beat Spurs. Obviously, like coming from the exact same game, arguably you'd think on the face of it, Arsenal are coming with the high that, that carries you through your tiredness because, Chelsea are kind of like down and feeling crap. But that was very much a game where Chelsea missed chance after chance and you were like, oh my God, like at what point are Tottenham going to be able to nick this just because they're missing so much? But this game was just like, Arsenal just looked so out of sorts and, of course you've got to make the changes and you've got to rotate and sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not. But it does feel like as opposed to like the rotational thing, it feels like a more consistent, like there's something about when they're not like under the bright lights that they can't find the same level.
I also think on the conditions point, we've all seen them pull off some stinky important wins at the Emirates, and I do think it's harder to achieve that when you're at Meadow Park.
I know, but the Meadow Park
but I think it's a combination of the two.
I get it if this was the first time they played at Meadow Park, but like you said, they played 3 Champions League games there this season. So I think any of this sense of like, they know what the pitch is like. The pitch has been shit for years. And famously, this Arsenal team, like all of those players have been there for years as well. It's not a new team. It's not players who've like never really played there before. You know what the conditions are like. Yeah, I don't know. I just find this a little bit like.
But I think what it is it's not necessarily just. It's failing to adapt. Rather than it's being savvy when you need to. That's exactly rather than just saying, oh well, there's nothing we can do because the pitch is bad. Like it's a failure to adapt when Brighton adapted, and that's why I think.
The other thing is Brighton aren't a team who normally lump it long or they're not even like a Spurs who I'd say they really focus on like their press and turning it over the high at the pitch. Like Dario Vidosic likes to play like he's like a City football group guy, like he likes to play nice possession football. And to be fair, I would say my biggest concern when he took the Brighton job was like, this probably is a bad idea with this like level of player. And I think generally he's like adapted quite well and been more flexible than I thought he would be. But again, like if Brighton can do that, why can't you do that? Because they don't play there that much. They play at the Emirates a lot, but it's still their home ground. Like they still know it. Just because the Crawley pitch is maybe more similar, like I don't know, for me I'm like, well, you know exactly what you're going into. It's not a surprise the game moved. It's not like last year when they had to move the Bayern game last minute. You knew you were playing this game on this pitch.
I think all of the things can be true at once, in that you can be frustrated with the conditions, but also you can fail to adapt when the opposition did adapt. And I think you have to be savvier in those moments and you have to be smarter. And I also think it exposes the lack of depth, which has been, a flag for this team who do need to have a big summer when you're going, unfortunately, to my good friend like Adina. Like the drop down is...
How pleased are you, Flo?
No comment. I think that it you got the pitch and then you've got everything underneath which exposes Arsenal's wider issues, which is the element of the lack of squad depth. It is the predictability of the same players who've been there for a very long time, and if they do have a bad game, what have you got off the bench? I think Holmberg's been brilliant in this recent run, but it was not her day yesterday. I think it's a whole piece rather than being able to say it's the pitch and there's nothing we can do about the pitch. You've got to bring it all together in those moments. And I do think they are better at doing that at the Emirates than they are at Meadow Park. But you're always going to have to navigate it, because there is not going to be, with Arsenal men also being in every single competition, a reality where you can realistically have every game at the Emirates. It's just not going to be possible.
But it's also not, because I do, like, the pitch thing is one thing, but like I also do think it's like a bit of a we've seen them. Think of the Villa game at the Emirates, like just a game where it's against a team who are sort of a mid-table team who you go ahead against, but you don't really put your foot down, and then they get a late equaliser. Like, I don't think this is just a pitch thing. I think it's that it feels like Arsenal, and you're always going to, like, every team has moments like this throughout the season. Like, I think Chelsea are the only top 4 team who beat Villa home and away. So, like, Villa are clearly a team who know how to cause problems, blah, blah, blah. Everyone drops points against, like, mid-table teams. But it just feels like consistently with Arsenal, they come up against these sides at different points, and it's like, it just feels like they just don't care as much, basically, about these games.
You do visibly see a level up when they are in those big games. I think energy, probably bite, aggression, which can get them very far. I think you see that in every single game against Chelsea that they play. You see a different version of them. And I agree with you, Jessy. I think there's that difference, but I think there's also other factors at play that add to that. But if they are going to deliver and win domestic trophies again, consistency is everything, and they are going to have to make sure that they get that rhythm and that level that Chelsea have in the past, that City have this season, who are undoubtedly the best team in England right now, because that's how you do it. You have to be able to deliver a 10 out of 10 every week. Let's move on to the other big game on Sunday, which was Charlton at home to Liverpool. Poor Charlton. I know we've talked about them being scammers this season, but they were very close to taking it to pens.
No, but that would have been a scam. The amount of Liverpool chances. It was the most pure Charlton performance you could see.
But if you're a lower ranked side in the competition, you'll do any means necessary to get it to pens.
Of course.
And there was a lovely story though, because Zara Shaw scored the winner for Liverpool. The most ridiculous goal, because
lovely.
You keep watching, you think, oh, Charlton, they've done enough. They cleared it. And it was gutting for them, obviously, because Liverpool got about 5 bites of the cherry to get the eventual winner. But Zara Shaw, she's only 18. She's come back from an ACL injury. She's a local Scouse girl. It was like a beautiful moment. Really lovely interview afterwards. Jill, obviously a former side of yours. And when you look at how this has mapped out for the draw, pretty tasty. We did the draw yesterday. Liverpool are going to be at home to Brighton in one of the semi-finals. They've got a very good shot at going to Wembley.
Yeah, and obviously just in regards to Zara, I mean, when I went to Liverpool, she was 15 and she was training with us, but she was like only doing a couple of days a week because obviously she had school. And I remember her training and I was just like, who is this kid? And it reminds me of Alessia Russo, when obviously Alessia was in training with like a company called Soccer Elite, which was like played with the boys. And I remember seeing her, and when I was at Chelsea and I'm thinking, you can just tell straight away when someone's got something. And then when I was at Liverpool with Zara, and I was just like, even when we do like in-house games and stuff, I'd be like, give me Zara sitting in front of me, because she's a talent for her age, and 15, 16 at the time. And then obviously I remember obviously her tearing her ACL, and it was just gutting, because especially when you got someone who's so young as well, and you just think that injury, you know how long it takes for them to come back, and then also at that age as well, is it going to have effects, or is it going to hold her back potentially? So then seeing obviously it was her it was a scrappy, but get that winner, and then obviously getting played a match and stuff, like it was just really, that was really nice. But yeah, in regards to like the draw, I mean, I'll take me back to when I was at West Ham, and we drew the lowest ranked team in every round going, and then you could just feel it in your waters. When we drew Reading and we managed to avoid the big guns, I was just like, this is it. We're gonna go to Wembley. So yeah, I'll be rooting for Liverpool to I think, especially of the year that they've had as well, and I think they're in a much better position now to be going into that semi. So I'll be hoping that they'll be getting to the final.
The squad is looking so much better. Like, the January recruitment has made a massive difference. They've obviously had a really tough season with injuries. Becky isn't on the show today, but we know that she is already having sleepless nights about them potentially fumbling a trip to Wembley. But it would be massive, and you talked about that, obviously everything happening with Beardy last year. It would be so special for them to get there, and obviously it's massive for Brighton, and it'd be great for Brighton to get there. But I do think there's something of a bit of a fairy tale if Liverpool were to make it. But again, Jessy, there's a sense as well that whoever does make it out of Brighton, Liverpool would be the sort of Spurs of the day, given what happened a few seasons ago.
Yeah, when I saw the draw, I was like, on the one hand, it's a brilliant draw, because to be guaranteed Brighton or Liverpool at Wembley is like an amazing thing, and kind of the opposite of what happened on the men's side, where you're like, oh, like it could have been have a similar thing with Southampton and Leeds, but you do then just worry. You're like, oh, but on the day itself, because it's not like Brighton and Liverpool, I think, can both give, definitely Chelsea, maybe also Man City, like a game on their day. I think what we've just seen in the past, say with like this, the Spurs experience, is the overwhelmingness of that occasion and like what it can mean for the whole club.
And also, not just that, we've talked a lot about pitches. It's very different going to Wembley
New
and doing
experience, that. And there are players who like have some kind of like understanding of that to an extent, but like Frank Kirby's not going to be overawed about going to play at Wembley. But I think sometimes in the past we've just seen that obviously leads to like very one-sided games, but that's all by the by and in the future, and who knows what can happen. And ultimately at the end of the day, it's a cup final, and you like to think that maybe a team would be able to prepare for that. And I think for Brighton or Liverpool, I think Brighton are a club who have spent a lot of time like building on like a fairly steady level, like in tandem, I'd say, with their model on the men's side as well, and I think would be a really good reward for like their progress and that they've made more slowly. Liverpool, as much as like on the face of it, I'm like, yeah, obviously an amazing story. I'm still a bit like eye roll because they as a club annoy me in terms of like it shouldn't feel like Liverpool are like this crazy, underdog moment. Like that's 2-time WSL winners there. But obviously like for that group, it would be really cool. And I guess what you hope is that maybe if they do make the final, that it's a bit of a sort of eye-opener on an exec level about, because they did go out and spend in January and bring players in and kind of use that Olivia Smith money that we knew they had. That maybe, sometimes you need to achieve something like that. I felt like that happened with Spurs, that when Spurs reached the FA Cup final, it did feel like kind of at the club, it was like a moment where people were like, oh, we are at this point where we can consider ourselves, we talk about top 4, but, you can be thinking about maybe more like a top 8 in terms of like really elite sides in the country. And I think, having that moment for either Brighton or Liverpool will be important.
Jill, could be a return for Grace Fisk to Wembley as Liverpool captain. I'm getting ahead of myself. What was it like though for you? Because I kind of jumped in there talking about the pitch, but it's one thing for a team like Brighton or Liverpool to go and rough up a big team at Kings Meadow or Meadow Park or at their home ground at Crawley. But what was it like when you had to play on that Wembley pitch? I think Kate's spoken about before, saying she was basically blowing out her ass within like minute 5.
It was difficult because it's one of those ones as well. I think it's harder for like the likes of like me and Kate, players who have been there before and like had success, because it was understanding that West Ham getting there, it was huge. And it was huge for the club. It was the typical story of the FA Cup. We was out and out underdogs, I think, in the whole of that competition. So you go there and it's not, you're prepping for something that you've not prepped before, in the sense of when we've gone with Arsenal or Chelsea to the FA Cup final, it was we're going to win. Whereas at West Ham, it weren't that we weren't going to win. Beardy had us set up, but it was about staying in the game for as long as possible and then trying to rely on the fact of that we might get 1 or 2 chances and you have to put them away. And I think we had a big chance in the first half. Jane Ross, where she had a header. I think if that goes in at 1-0, I don't think it would have changed the story. But we'd worked so hard in that first half because there was a lot of it. It was about pride, and it was about, we didn't want it to be, we knew it could have been, especially against City, where we'd played City how many times and been beaten like 6-7. We didn't want that because we as a group didn't deserve that. But it was about, I think, we were so tired from defending so hard in that first half, and again we didn't have a squad. We didn't really have players on the bench who could come on and look. We didn't really have that where we could go like, listen, we can go and win the game here. And I think we killed ourselves with the goals that we conceded against City, because I think players lost their head a little bit in the occasion. Ellen White was talking yesterday on 5 Live about the FA Cup and about like, would West Ham, for example, take staying in the Premier League or to win the FA Cup. And then they was talking about playing in the FA Cup but not winning it. And it was a bit like, as in, no, you don't want to do that. And I was just a bit like, I've had that feeling where I've won the FA Cup and I've played in it and not won it. And the difference between me not winning it when I was at Chelsea and at Arsenal compared to the feeling of not winning it when I was at West Ham is two completely different feelings. And it was like, no, if I'm West Ham, I know really, we know our place as well, in the sense of we're not expected to go there and win in that final, but it's huge for our club to get to the FA Cup final. And I think you're looking at Liverpool and Brighton, either one of them getting into the FA Cup final there, they're going to be underdogs. And it's going to be difficult because you ain't going to be able to go out and press because of the pitch, but also because of the occasion. You're naturally going to be like, your adrenaline's going to go like flat because, and it's going to go up. It's going to literally be because of the you see the crowd, you're like, you're on telly, you don't want to be going down early. So it's going to be hard for them, but it's huge for both clubs to get to the final. And like you're saying, hopefully it will be a catalyst sometimes to go, listen, this is what we can do. And now you then hopefully can get some more investment off the pitch and you can drive them on going forward.
Well, let's talk about what happened in the other quarterfinals next. So Chelsea beating Spurs 2-1. Jessy, it was a game where Chelsea probably could have got themselves a little bit more comfortable and in a stronger position, but they ended up missing a few chances, and Viola Berlin, who's had a brilliant couple of weeks, gets her first Chelsea goal, gets the winner after a Evelina Summanen. She always scores these random long distance goals where the goalkeeper just wasn't even paying attention. But yeah, job done for Chelsea, very much stopping what could have been a really disastrous week. And they are through to yet another semi-final. This is a massive competition for them now because they've got the League Cup in the bag. They're out of the title race. If they could pull off some kind of domestic double, it would salvage what has been a bit of a crap season for them. Overall, you must be relieved and pleased that they got the job done.
Yeah, although I think it says a lot about, the standards that Chelsea set for themselves and are set externally, that it's domestic double to salvage the season, where you're most teams, including City and Arsenal over the years, would have bitten your hand off for that being your crap season. So, I think it was important for them to get the win. I think it was a game that you obviously expected them to win. It would have been a disappointment to lose it, but I guess as we see with the Arsenal result, that these things aren't a given in any way. And yeah, I think Sonia was talking about it after the game, when you think about how intense this block's been for Chelsea, that you start with that Subway final, you run through a lot of important WSL games which don't all go well, which are quite chaotic, obviously the disappointment of the Arsenal games. I think to finish off with this is huge, and I think they can feel like draws are draws, but woof, to play Manchester United, Spurs and City, if they do make it to Wembley, they can very much feel like they deserve to be there. It's almost like the opposite of Gilly's story in terms of, who you get drawn against. Yeah, I thought this was a pretty good performance from Chelsea, to be honest. They definitely could have taken more chances, but they did at least create the chances. At points I was tearing my hair out of some of the misses. The Ellie Carpenter one was crazy. There's the Kerr one where
but is that
passes it to her.
Is that not a bit of a red flag, given that's the story of the quarterfinal in the Champions League?
Personally, my feeling always is that finishing is going to vary, and it's been a bad finishing season for Chelsea. I don't think anyone's under any illusions about that. We don't have a lot of attackers in form. We don't have a lot of attackers who are fit. My bigger concern would be that is what it is, right? And I think Chelsea are going to have a lot of ins and outs in the summer. New players will come in, different things will happen. I would be more concerned about the future if Chelsea weren't creating chances. I'm okay, this is a team that seems to be set up well enough tactically to create chances against Arsenal, to create chances against Spurs. As I've said before, I'm far more concerned about the way Chelsea could see chances, although that wasn't really the case in this game. Although I thought Niamh Charles had a very good game at left back and made some really important tackles when Spurs would have been through on goal. So, personally, that doesn't worry me as much, because I just think that's the kind of thing that sometimes, Chelsea have also had seasons where they've scored goals out of absolutely nothing throughout the entire season. And clearly at the end of the day, you've got Berman, who can apparently pull something like that out of the bag. And, you know, she was, I think we can say, maybe unfairly robbed of her first Chelsea goal the other week. So nice to see her finally get one, and a great goal and an important goal to score. But I think Chelsea were deserving winners, even though Spurs managed to stay in it for as long as they did. I think in terms of what Chelsea were able to create, and Spurs were lucky to get away with the problems they caused themselves. I think from a Tottenham perspective, that's what I'd have been disappointed by. Like, I know Chelsea didn't benefit from them, but there were just a few too many moments, it felt like, where there was this kind of overplaying, this lack of concentration, which, even though Chelsea didn't take advantage of, you didn't get in the position which maybe Brighton were able to get in with Arsenal, where you're like really frustrating the opposition. I think Chelsea always felt there was going to be one more chance, even if it was going to go to extra time, they were going to get opportunities. And I think that's what you'd want to change, I think, for Tottenham going forward in these bigger games.
And do you feel like you also saw a team that had shaken off the midweek low and defeat as well?
Yeah, I thought Walsh was good. I thought Cuthbert was far better than I've seen her play in recent weeks. I thought Germa was like solid. Buchanan had like a lot of good moments. Niamh Charles, as I say, like, she's barely played, obviously, but she looked sharp. So yeah, I think when you consider like how thin on the ground Chelsea's options were as well, we talked about Arsenal rotating. Chelsea didn't really have much choice but to not particularly rotate. I thought they played well. I thought it would have been really easy, to feel like they were just tired, that they'd played a lot of games, that they'd had a lot of chaotic games when you're thinking about, like the Villa game, for example. But I thought they did well. They kept it tight at the back. I mean, the Spurs goal, like, I've been really intrigued. I don't think we're going to get it now, but I was a little bit surprised that we haven't seen Peng start at all, because I thought she was really decent when Hampton was injured, and I think right now it's clear that like Hampton's head's just absolutely not in it at the moment. It's not just the goal she concedes, it's like the distribution is all over the place. So I don't know whether that's something we'll see after the international break, or maybe the international break will give her the opportunity to, I don't know, watch Mary Earps be paraded around Wembley on Tuesday. I think ever since that moment, she's not really looked the same. So it'll be interesting to see how Bonpastor feels about that. But
I don't think, for me, it's less the Earps thing and more just coming back from her injury. She hasn't looked like, and it does.
It's impossible to know from the outside. It was sort of similar. She'd just come back from the injury.
Yeah,
right?
but I do think with any player coming back from injury, and especially when goalkeeper is so much about form and, getting your eye in and getting those movements, it just does feel like she hasn't managed to find any of that rhythm that she was in unbelievable form just before she got injured.
Well, I think the other thing is, I think goalkeeping obviously is such a confidence game a lot of the time, and I think we know that she's someone who can get quite emotional, and I think beyond injury or Earps or whatever it is, it feels like there have been setbacks this season which, whilst they are maybe not now affecting her, because she's been back from injury for a long time, that you can start a little chain. And that's what I feel like with Hampton. It's like when there's one mistake, then there's another mistake, and she's like getting rattled, and you can see it, and that's why the distribution goes bad, and etc. etc. And I think that's kind of the routine we've been in.
Yeah, while other players in the group can manage the mistakes and the results and the bad performances and then bounce back the week after, she's a player who doesn't have that same ability. She's not as resilient as
That's
other
what
players.
It feels like at the moment. Yeah.
Because actually, weirdly, in that London City game,
Hannah Hampton just threw your phone on the floor in anger. The ghost of Hannah Hampton.
The Spotify studio ghost just appeared and threw my phone on the floor. Weirdly, in that London City game, which was the day of the Earps kind of drama, the home game, she actually looked all right, and that's when all eyes are on her. And Bonpastor kind of spoke very loudly afterwards about how much it impacted her. But then we started to see more of issues around that. Anyway, I do think as well, Jessy, I mean, we kind of joked at the start of the show about you being less rattled, but there is something different to this Champions League exit for Chelsea, and I think we spoke about this with Tim as well, when it's not like you've been battered by Barcelona And for that as a group, even though it's still not great for them, they won't be as maybe bruised as they have been in the past.
Yeah, it's like a weird feeling. I think, obviously, I do feel like over the course of both legs, there wasn't really much to separate the two sides. And I think if Chelsea had taken their chances at Stamford Bridge, I'm not saying they'd have won. I think they'd have put Arsenal under a lot of pressure. I think Bonpastor did well in a kind of Hayesian way of really focusing on the Thompson hair pull, which I think she was right to be pissed off about as well. I think some of the discourse around that has missed how frustrating it is to have the decision go against you at the Emirates and just feel like, what the hell is going on here? But I also think it's something that worked well because it dominated what everyone was talking about, rather than the fact that Chelsea had missed 2 or 3 chances to really put Arsenal under pressure. But yeah, I mean, I think some of the Barcelona things have been very obviously bruising, and a feeling of you're really far away from where you want to be. Who knows what Chelsea would look like if they played Barcelona? And I mean, we saw them play Barcelona and they drew. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I think it's one of those things which it's on the one hand, it's frustrating because you feel like the team played quite well and couldn't get through. But on the other hand, you're like, but the team played quite well. So sometimes stuff just doesn't go your way.
And in the final quarterfinal of the weekend, Man City beating Birmingham City 1-0. So it is going to be Chelsea versus City. Likely, I imagine, at Kings Meadow. There's probably not time to...
Despite Chelsea erroneously putting on multiple places that will be at Wembley, I did check with the FA. It's not at Wembley.
Why were they putting that? Was it Wembley?
I don't know if they got confused because the men are at Wembley, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, I was like, I'm certain this game's not Wembley. And then they put it in another thing this morning, and I was like, I'm just going to ask the FA. And they were like, no, we don't know what Chelsea's doing.
That seems like a bold take to just suddenly say, we're playing at Wembley. We haven't asked the FA, but it's happening.
You're going to be there.
Before we talk about Man City's performance, we have to give a shout out actually to WSL2 sides across the weekend, because Charlton pushing Liverpool right to the end, and Birmingham City also only narrowly losing to Man City, who played a very, very strong. They didn't really rest many players. Laura Coombs started and Miedemar was injured, and Keating started in goal. But overall, that was the best team in England. You're playing them and you only lose 1-0. They deserve a lot of credit. I think it's exciting when we think about the playoff game that's on the horizon, because you're looking at Liverpool as well. They're out of danger now, but you're thinking, okay, this playoff, whoever ends up there could be far closer than we think. And it also bodes well for if Charlton and Birmingham both come up, they're going to be able to compete. I mean, we've talked a lot about Charlton, but as in reality, are they going to be able to dig in like they dig in across a whole season?
Birmingham, I think, very clearly as well.
Yeah.
Even this season, and last season, they've spent a lot on this group, relative to WSL2 standards. And last season they obviously pushed a London City Lionesses team who, let's say again, lost £10 million in that season. That's how much money was going into that club there. They pushed them to the final day. They look like Birmingham will probably get an automatic promotion spot, I think, because Newcastle drew with Forest at the weekend. Now Charlton and Birmingham are guaranteed at least being in the playoff. So yeah, but I think Birmingham are definitely a team who have spent and will spend more. Charlton, I'd put a little bit more of an asterisk on that.
Yeah, we know that there's been budget cuts in the past at Charlton across the whole club. The men's team hasn't done very well this season. Birmingham City, I mean, we were there for the draw yesterday, St Andrews. These new American owners, there's tons of money going into it. Tom Brady's face is everywhere, even though he only has a minority share.
Tommy Shelby's face is everywhere.
Tommy Shelby's face is everywhere.
Even though he only has a minority share.
They've done so many renovations to the stadium. There's a big, exciting vision there, which is great news for the women's team and that project. And it does make you think, okay, when they do go up, probably rather than if, Jill, there is going to be money behind them. And they've shown with a game like this that they're not probably going to come up and be that side that gets destroyed 10-0.
Yeah, hopefully. And you're looking as well, it isn't necessarily a team coming up, not that it's not the results that you get against the top four are not important, but they're not realistically in the sense of when you come up, That's first season after coming up. It's similar to the men's. The main thing is you stay in it. So for Birmingham coming up, obviously that gives them so much confidence to know, listen, that we can go toe to toe really with a Man City side. It isn't necessarily their results that against Arsenal, Chelsea, City, United that are going to be ones that are going to think, oh, do you know what? Yeah, our life depends on it in staying in the WSL. It's the teams that you have to play that are in and around you where you have to be the ones to go and pick up them points and stay in it. But I do think it's like huge confidence for WSL 2 to say in that playoff game especially to be like, because you're looking at obviously potentially could be Leicester sitting in that playoff game, the difference between Leicester and Man City, like it's big. So yeah, I think there's a lot of confidence, but the main thing is from a team coming up from WSL2 is in that first season is you need to make sure that you're not a yo-yo club, that you are the club that end up staying up there.
Well, also I guess what's going to be interesting this year as opposed to past years is you will come up with at least one, if not two, WSL2 teams, and it will be only one automatic relegation spot. So even if you're just thinking about those other teams that might come up with you, that I feel like that changes your calculation a bit as well, like compared to when we've seen teams have to come into the league before and you're playing all your games are against teams which are so much more established.
Yeah, definitely. City, the goal they did score, such a lovely team goal, really nice. This feels like such an opportunity for them. We speak about Chelsea salvaging that double. I think City, realistically, with the team that they have right now, with what they've delivered in the WSL and the margin which they could win the league, I want to see them claim another trophy with it. I feel like they need to. Otherwise, it does feel like, what might have been. So
it's funny, it's a bit Arsenal men-esque, isn't it? Because I get what you're saying, but like for City to win the WSL and win it comprehensively is huge. It's an amazing achievement. It's been years, obviously, since they've done it, and I don't think you need anything else in the same way that if Arsenal men win the Premier League, I don't think they need to win anything else. But when you've played at such a high level, it does feel like you want something to really show. And we've talked all through this about how amazing the day out at Wembley is, like how in some ways that like I don't think it tops winning the league, but it's like a very different feeling in terms of getting that one game and that huge celebration at the stadium. So yeah, I think, but in the same way Chelsea are probably kicking themselves there, like, oh, now we've got to go and play Chelsea.
Well, that's the thing. I will say the run that City have been on basically ever since they lost that first game of the season against Chelsea has been so impressive. Losing to them in the League Cup semi-final, but really a game where they on another day could have won. They created enough, but beating them in the league, I think they will go to Kings Meadow feeling fairly confident. The only downside is question mark over Viv Miedemar's injury. She's not going away to international duty with Netherlands, so they'll hope that's not a massive long-term issue. There is also a bit of time before these semi-finals because they're not until the 9th and 10th of May, so there's a bit of period there. She's been in such good form for them in recent weeks, but I reckon they'll feel pretty good that even though it's the harder of the two potential ties, I think Jägerlets will feel pretty confident based on their performances and also how they've played Chelsea in the second half of the season that they can beat them.
Yeah, look, Chelsea have beaten City twice this season. City absolutely smashed Chelsea. Both teams will feel like they can win. I think it will be a fun game. I think generally as well, even though Chelsea have kind of ended up on the tough end of this, there was obviously talk at the start of the season about, the potential of seeding the FA Cup. Like, wow, what a great kind of advert it's been for not doing that. Because, Arsenal and United both out before the semi-final stage and were guaranteed like a new team in the final. But it'll be interesting. You can play it either way, I think. Yeah, as I say, City have obviously played really well in their last two games against Chelsea, but they've not won them both. Equally, you could turn around and say, well, Chelsea have really disappointed, I think, generally in their games against the top four, and what an opportunity to like show what you can do against a team that humiliated you. So I think both teams will feel like we can do this.
Yeah, should be really interesting. We'll wrap it there on the FA Cup. Jill, you got some hollybobs this week?
Yeah, I'm off on my travels tomorrow.
Very nice, very jealous. Jessy, what awaits you this week?
I'm at Arsenal Bournemouth on Saturday in the Premier League. That's my main excitement for the week.
Wow, back on the Prem duty.
Back on Prem duty, yeah.
Well, very interesting. Well, we'll be back on Thursday with a pod. We'll see you then.